Hello, and welcome to the Castle Horror Podcast, where we talk about horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we are back with a special bonus episode of our incoming retrospective on giant monsters to celebrate the release of Godzilla vs. Kong. To get us in the headspace tonight, we are talking about the queen of the monsters herself, Mothra. So I am your fill-in host for Jason Henderson, Drew Edwards, writer and creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Comixology. Also from Austin, Texas, is Tony Savaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hi, Tony.
Howdy.
And also in Austin, special guest tonight, Jamie Bahr is a musician, activist, and educator. She is the lead singer and upright bassist for Austin's premier all-female rock and roll band Danger Cakes. She is the bassist for the queergrass band Brand New Key and the executive director of Girls Rock Austin. Say hello, Jamie.
Hello, Jamie.
And finally, from exotic Colorado, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman and a Graceman. I just said that just as white as Jason always does. I can never ridicule him for that ever again. Anyway, say hello, Julia.
Hello, I'm here representing the Guzman Henderson household by myself. And Jason is fine, everybody. Don't worry. He's just working.
He's being a literary genius, is what he's doing. He's off being a literary genius. Okay, so Mothra, according to Wikipedia, is a 1961 Japanese monster film directed by Ishiro Honda and written by Shinichi Sukazawa, with special effects by Eiji Tsuburaya, I'm probably mangling that, produced and directed by Toho Studios of Godzilla fame. It is the first film in the Mothra franchise. Mothra has gone on to be one of the most prominent characters in the larger kaiju universe, and most recently has appeared in Legendary's Godzilla King of the Monsters. The film stars Frankie Sakai, Jerry Ito, and of course the Peanuts as the twin fairies of Infant Ida. So I want to start out ladies first, since we are representing the queen. So we're going to go Jamie, Julia, Tony, and then myself. But I also want to know which version of this movie you watched, because, well, there are different versions. There is an English dub and there is the Japanese original. So Jamie, which version of this movie did you watch, and what were your first impressions of Mothra?
Well, we watched the Japanese version, and I thought it was a very interesting movie. I thought it was actually very poignant in the depictions of like small towns, or say in Newkirk city at the end, and some of the practical effects. Some of it feels a little cheesy, but I kind of like that. I hadn't seen this movie since I was a child, and it was one of those things that I really didn't watch. It was always like on in the background at my grandparents' house, and my grandfather and my cousin Mikey would watch this movie, and I would just pass out and kind of watch it on the couch and half sleep. So there's something very soothing about this movie, which kind of makes me feel very relaxed. That and all of the singing I do love, but I have to say I think this is like my favorite monster, of the whole Gojira universe, I guess.
Excellent. That's great. Julia, first impressions, Mothra.
Jason and I actually watched this movie maybe last year for reasons I don't recall why, but we did. And then, so this time I watched it, and my daughters happened to both be in the room and did not leave, which I was surprised by. So it was a girl party for watching Mothra, and they were, pretty horrified by how the poor fairies were treated, and also by the blackface of the natives.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a rough one.
Asking. I guess that's like,
I felt bad watching it with them and being like, it's just, trying to apologize for covering. But you know what? There's a lot of great things about it. I love the moth. I love the moth. I love all the practical effects. I love the effects of the miniatures and all of the I love the way that they have the silkworms, webbing when she shoots when she brings the helicopter down. All these little effects are just brilliant. So I think there's a lot of really neat things. I love the fairies. I feel bad that they are mistreated, but I do like them. So it's fun.
And which version of the movie did you watch?
Oh, sorry. Yes. I watched the English dub.
Okay. And Tony, same question. Which version of the movie did you watch? And I doubt that this is your first time watching this, but
no, but
give us your first impression.
I watched the Japanese version. Rain and I watched it last night. I hadn't seen the original in a while. And I think a lot of people, the way I remember it, because there's kind of a reintroduction in the Mothra versus Godzilla version, I think a lot of people remember that one more, and I understand why. It was I hadn't watched this in a while, and it was really kind of cool just to see the origin story once again. And, it's kind of also comparatively, it's kind of a slower burn movie, which is really interesting to introduce a character, to introduce a new monster and have it flow this way. I really enjoy it. It's legitimately a really good movie, a great score. Again, the natives deciding to make them this kind of blackface as well as just, hey, we're going to have sort of Polynesian natives, but then we're going to give them this makeup is kind of twofold, like cringy. But there's a lot of that stuff. There's some animation from Japan, especially from the 60s, that is really good, and yet the depictions in it of Black characters especially is just really something I'm like, I really like this animation. One of them is like Cyborg 009, where luckily in the new ones they've kind of fixed the character designs, but it's of a time, and I can see why people, you may look at it and go, yeah, this isn't for me. I just can't condone this, and I get that. But that is the kind of elephant in the room when you watch this is, oh man, that is really not what we would do, and that I don't know why they just made those choices. But it is really like there's a lot of really good bits, and it's interesting also to see this very kind of anti-Western approach as well, because it's strange to see, because Rolisica is kind of America, but it's also kind of European as well. And in fact, some parts of it almost seem like America and Russia rolled together in a strange way. But yeah, I really like the movie. I think it's definitely worth checking out, and gives you the context of the Mothra monster before you see her in a Godzilla movie.
Awesome. I'm not going to go too in depth on this. I would just say that I think this is one of the finest movies that Toho ever has produced. I think that the effects here hold up remarkably well. I think better than a lot of the Godzilla movies. I think Mothra is a fairly convincing mixture of, guys in suits, of course, puppetry, and a few times animation. And I think she looks really good. And I don't know that I've ever thought that she looks good in some of the later Godzilla movies, but I think she looks at her absolute best here. The Mothra theme is an absolute earworm, or should I say ear caterpillar. I will now be singing it for days and days and days and days, and I'm sure we'll talk more about the music in this later. But I think that this is a kaiju classic, and if you are interested in giant monster films of the atomic age, this is definitely a movie that you should check out. So getting into the plot of this thing, I think Tony, you obviously have probably the deepest relationship with Japanese monster films of anybody in this group that we have here tonight. How would you describe the plot of this movie, particularly the beginning of it?
Well, it starts it's more of an adventure movie at first. and kind of suspense thriller in a way, or just like a Hunt for Red October kind of thing,
almost takes its cue from a lot of James Bond movies,
right? Because you have a shipwreck, and then there's the discovery of, hey, well, we were supposed to have just nuked the hell out of that island. It was supposed to be a test island. Why aren't these people affected by radiation? And so it's part mystery. There's a lot of meat to this, and also they keep the atomic theme, because once you find out that basically they nuked this island, and Relistica kind of knew, or at least pretended to care less that they may have nuked an inhabited island. Nobody really wants to talk about that.
Yeah, no kidding.
For fear of actually being an international incident, and once it really happens, and you kind of bring that to the forefront. It's a little more subtle than perhaps the original Godzilla in what it's trying to portray. But I think that and Nelson, who becomes the villain, not to get too far ahead, but this is a person who is a possibly sex trafficker, or they say he goes someplace to find beautiful women. He at least traffics in people in general, for his shows. And the actor, he's great too, because whenever you see him make his villain a smile, it's on. But in the beginning we get.
As an immigration attorney, I can just tell you, we don't distinguish just human trafficking. So he's a human trafficking. He's doing human trafficking, whether they're sex workers or not.
Exactly.
He looks an awful lot like how when Jack Kirby would draw Doctor Doom, like pre being, Doctor Doom. Like he has such a good bad guy look because he has such an expressive face.
Yeah, and even when he's leering, and he plays it that like, yeah, but I'm gonna be cool, but I'm also the most evil person ever in all of this. And with no qualm, to him, it's not evil. He's just, this is what I do, man.
Business. It's business.
Yeah, it's total business for this guy. And that's horrifying, and also what makes him such a great villain.
It's horrifying, and yet there's so many people who are actually like that.
Yeah.
Oh well, yeah. I mean that's what's truly horrifying, right? When you're an adult and you know exactly that. This watching it as a kid and watching it now also changes that, especially when they're talking about. Yeah, he goes down to these countries and just finds beautiful women to bring back. Like, wait, what? Like, how is this guy still around? And Relistica employs this guy.
Beautiful women, or I thought they were beautiful artifacts.
Well, no, he does both.
At one point, they say specifically, like, yeah, he does this, and you're like, oh no, that's
So let's jump right into that. I think this movie has two big themes in it, and one of them being anti-capitalism, and one of them being anti-colonialism. But the way they go about it, because Toho knew that this movie was going to be playing in America as well as Japan, is they have come up with this composite country that Tony has already brought up that represents sort of Japan's grievances with the West. And I wanted to know what everybody like as far as this film's attitudes towards, the West. I won't just say America, because obviously, America is probably the biggest target, but it's not just, the only target. Like, coming away from this, do you think that was the right decision to keep it generic? Or do you think that they should have just said, okay, we're gonna aim all our pistols at America and fire?
I think to me, keeping it generic and making up a country, which they do a lot depending on which movie it is. I think in the best way of horror, it allows allows people not to get as offended immediately. Like, it was just, oh, it's America, then you're gonna turn off X amount of people. So holding this mirror to the West as a collective, I think, was the right decision. For people to go, oh, well, Relistica is this way, that's bad, and you go, yeah, but here's what. Oh, what? Whoa! That it. I mean, it's
Well,
not
and it's not
super
just the West;
sophisticated,
it's
but it's just
Russia and
exactly.
America, and
Yeah.
of course, Americans have had their issues with Russia. Not with certain people, notwithstanding, but we've had our issues with Russia, and so I think you're right. I think the idea that you can watch it and go, "Oh, okay, well, to the extent that we don't like these people, that's the Russian part."
Right. I think making it generic was the right decision. One thing that's interesting that kind of fascinated me rewatching it this time was that this film, because of they chose to do that, we get a lot of scenes outside of Japan and characters outside of Japan, like the foreigners, as far as Japan goes, get a lot of the, oh no, Mothra's coming, or the destruction. And, we don't see a lot of that in a lot of the Toho pictures. We don't see a lot of that until way later. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that I had kind of forgotten about until that we have a whole section that takes place outside of Japan and allows for kind of a different take on this destruction and how they're reacting to the monsters, and how a different country deals with that. I thought that was kind of fascinating.
I thought, to leapfrog off of what you're saying, Tony, having it not be, actually like the United States or Russia or a specific place that's not, or a specific place that's actually real instead of what it is, the Rolsica or Rolisica. I think it kind of helps build a suspension of disbelief too, with kind of making this a little bit on the dreamy side at points.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, when you hear that they're in the very beginning when they're talking about like the ship, being caught between a typhoon and an island of radiation, and then they're suddenly like drinking the red berry juice or the red juice, and totally fine. It's, I don't know, there's a whole thing, like, there's a part of your mind which is like, I've seen Chernobyl, they would be like bubbly, like
right.
and his skin would be like falling off of him. That's some juice, and I think there's a lot of those types of moments where I know I'm somebody where I don't know why sometimes I will put practical, today, like realistic reality, into something like this, where it's like, that's not going to happen, but why does this one thing make me suddenly question everything and take me out of the movie? There's that like moment where something like knocks you out. Like for me, I felt bad because I like laughed out loud when Clark Nelson picks up the fairies the first time and he like grabs them, and that like part, like they go from it being them, instead of just having them cut away, it looks like he's picking up like Barbie dolls. And I don't know why that just cracked me up so much. Like, and I wish there was like something maybe a little bit more. I'm kind of, I don't know, segueing into, I guess, the effects aspect of this, but with the whole idea of like the countries not being a real place, like that's one of those things where it helps keep it like, okay, I'm not thinking of specific places like, the United States, or when they show up in Newkirk City,
right.
And it's like, wow, there's a lot of white people here.
Right. And, also totally not the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah.
But it also allows them to play a little bit more fast and loose with the embassy and the international relations with Rolisica, because it's not a country that we know. You're kind of just go, well, I guess that's how they treat them,
Well,
so it allows that kind of distance, I guess.
The other thing that this does, and this is in stark contrast with Godzilla, the original Godzilla film, which was very rooted in a sort of real world, almost documentary like aesthetic. And this is the same filmmaker and the same studio, and you have a film that is much more fanciful and willing to dive into fantasy elements. Mothra, of course, also having elements of like having a almost supernatural type creature, as opposed to a mutant like Godzilla. And I think that that's really going forward, when they did Godzilla, the original King Kong versus Godzilla, and then Godzilla versus Mothra, it kind of gave them a direction to go in with the other films, that because you couldn't, they did Godzilla raids again, which I think sort of proves that you couldn't keep trying to do the same movie that the original Godzilla is. It's just
Right.
It just would have been too much for a franchise.
This has a way more dreamlike nature as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of in contrast with, it's definitely in contrast with the original, but most of the Toho movies, this feels, the quality of it and, how it's told, I think is a little bit more dreamlike than most of the other movies of this era of Godzilla.
Yeah. I wanted to pose a question directly towards Jamie and Julia, because this is in many ways a female-centered story, because you have the fairies, which are kind of the MacGuffin of the movie, is that we have to get these fairies which have been abducted by this slime ball, and then you have Mothra, which is of course one of the only major female movie monsters, and I kind of wanted to, it's still being told by a male filmmaker, and the human heroes, with the exception of the photographer, are all they're all men. I wanted to know if you thought that if this did right by, I guess, a feminine energy or anything like that. Is there stuff that you think it could have done better?
I think there was definitely still parts that were very much of the male gaze, the fairies specifically, like when they, go and have to do their little show, there's this sensuality. And there's also this one part where when they've been, boxed up, and the brother of the scientist finds them, and he's like, I'm gonna take you home, and they're like, no, don't take us home, Martha's gonna destroy everything, so we'll just wait here. But when he first opens it up, it looks like they were topless. And I don't know if anybody else notices this, but it was like they suddenly put their shoulders back up, the little shroud thing that I don't know what it's called, but it's like a I don't know, like a camisole, but they both cover their shoulders suddenly. And I don't know if they're just like, oh, a man or a boy intruder, but I guess they wouldn't be like that. They'd be like, yeah. So, because that was the other thing, they're like, yeah, we understand all languages because we're telepathic, but they have that cool voice thing going on, like auto tune or auto harp. But I don't know.
I think it's complicated because the question, Drew, because it's an Asian feminine energy. So to me, I see the way that the fairies are as being, they're so sweet and polite, and even when people are being horrible to them, they're like, oh, but they don't get mad, they don't lash out, and they're always just very, I guess polite is the best word I can think of, in all regards, and they smile a lot, they say thank you, etc. So that to me is a really interesting choice, and I think it's consistent with the culture as much as I know about it, which is not a whole lot. As far as the Mothra creature, there's really nothing particularly feminine about her, because she's not. She doesn't do anything any different than any of the other creatures. She still destroys the crap out of all the buildings. And I get it that it's not her fault. She's just big. So she's just kind of coming through. But there's still tons of destruction, and nothing particularly nurturing, except for the fact that she's coming to save these girls. And yet that's males of all species do that as well. They're always all about the rescuing the damsel in distress. Cool. So I'm curious what you see as being more feminine. I get that she is female, but other than that, how you see her as being different from other monsters.
I will point out stuff that has been pointed out to me. Mm-hmm. And I very much want to get what you two think about it. What I have heard consistently from film critics and books that genre films and things like that. First off, Mothra, unlike Godzilla and unlike King Kong, who are her probably two most direct descendants as far as movie monsters go, is not. She's her design is beautiful. She's colorful. Even when she's a caterpillar, she's cute. So like she's it's funny. Like you look at the movie poster for this, and the Mothra on the movie poster is much more terrifying looking than the Mothra in the movie, which is this sort of mythic but beautiful creature. The other thing that has been pointed out to me is that unlike King Kong and unlike Godzilla, at the end of the movie, Mothra peacefully flies back to her island, and actually everybody waves, even despite all the destruction.
That happens with Godzilla sometimes, when Godzilla just walks off into the ocean. I mean,
I'm thinking about, I guess, like the context of the times, because the only Godzilla movie at this point was the original Godzilla movie where he's killed. And then Godzilla Raids Again, where he's still a menace. So, then of course I've had, and again, you two, I want to know your reaction to this. I have also heard reads of this movie where they have called it sexist because you have a example of a female character, which is a giant female character, a giant moth, but it's the stereotype of a woman who can't control her temper, sort of writ large.
No, I'm going to just say no to that one, because the fact is, like I said, she's just destroying stuff because she's big. She doesn't actually have. I never see her as being. I never perceived her to be angry, and I certainly didn't perceive the fairies to be angry.
Yeah, I don't think she was angry either. I can see why people think of that as maternal, because, she's just making a beeline to the fairies, and nothing is going to stand in her way. Whether it's a dam, she'll be damned if anything gets in her way. But there's there's a whole idea that's to say that that's sexist. That I don't know. That just seems to be reaching a bit. If you're going to talk about sexist, let's talk about the photographer, where she's the one who's constantly kind of getting ridiculed. She's being talked about. What's her name? Michi Hanamura was. Anytime she's talking, she's like, "Yeah, I'm a realist. I'll believe something when I see it. I want facts." And they're like, oh, facts. Power of the press. There's a reason why the press want to know, because the people want to know, and I want to know. And throughout the movie, they kind of ridicule her. And I mean, I guess it's kind of a display of wow, there's how few women were in the actual movie in a professional level. So if you want to think of it the sexism here, the only other women besides her are the the twin fairies. And can you think of any other women that I'm missing?
I mean, just the native women. That's pretty much it.
Yeah,
exactly. It was
kind of frustrating. Get machine gunned.
The native women don't have personalities independent of the native men, except for just that the men are more attacking. But I would say, just to add to what Jamie's saying about at the end when she forgets to take the pictures. I think that's a natural thing for somebody who is completely stunned at what's happening to forget to take pictures. But the fact that they all go, that was just, to me, so different than the reaction would have been if it had been a male. I feel like if it had been a male, they would have been whacked him on the back of the head or something. They just been oh my gosh. But I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting reaction.
Just the same thing, actually. He was they're like, oh, you're gonna be fired.
Yeah, exactly.
Job.
Yeah, I was kind of frustrated that Michi didn't get as much, because watching some other movies, and then also some of them we've covered, and stuff like Ultra Q, her role gets diminished a lot, and is this kind of women. But to be honest, that's probably what she encounters, unfortunately, especially in the 60s, all the time.
Oh, yeah.
They just make it's a shame that they don't kind of twist that when they've got Mothra and the twins and such like that. It seems like a missed opportunity. Again, I don't mean to create a different movie where, if only this had happened. But that, in retrospect, I think, I just wish she was more, it is kind of funny too. Like I was telling Drew, I like Zen because he's also seems to be, he has this like Buddy Hackett energy.
Yeah, I like Zen too. But
I love that guy. He's hilarious.
But yeah, he just reminded me of like all the times I've seen Buddy Hackett in things.
Is he a famous comedian? This actor?
I am not sure. I haven't done enough research.
He was famous in Japan.
Yeah, but he's great. His physical comedy as well as just kind of how he goes through everything is really on point. And it doesn't. The thing is it's not cloying either. It fits. It's not just over the top. Whoa!
I want to get into Zen in a second, but it sounded like Jamie had one other thing to say.
Yeah, about Mishi Hanamura. But that whole thing, Tony, you were just saying about how that was like an oversight. But now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, it's because of that. It's like, oh well, technically, it's like most of this film would kind of pass the Bechdel test. She's still in a lot of the scenes, not all of them. I mean, obviously there's a lot of scenes where there's no women speaking at all. But if there's this whole facet of her becoming, like how you just said, how she's, you're getting a kind of a more realistic view of what it probably was like for a woman in the press during that time. And then the other female characters in the story, the fairies, are also being like dominated by the patriarchy,
but we have no sense. You're talking about the Bechdel test. We have no sense of what the fairy's sexuality is, so they wouldn't they have no reason to talk about a male because we don't know if they're if they're even attracted to males or if they even have males that are their size. For that matter.
Yeah.
It seems like that they are supernatural beings of at least some sort, but
I don't know if there's like male versions of their.
No, we never, and in none of the Godzilla movies that follow, we never learn that. But
that's part of the Bechdel test is like finding. You have to have a storyline. It's like and have scenes where the women aren't like the subject of desire, and I do feel like at some points that for the most part, the fairies seem very like pure and sweet. And then like there is that weird like lust filter that gets put on it in a couple scenes that like where you're supposed to realize know obviously that like, oh, they're being exploited, and I feel like showing that aspect of it, showing the struggle, and then having I guess Mothra is, the one that they all pray to. Well, I mean, Nishi's didn't pray, but, actually they do pray at the end. But, they all pray for this, goddess to save them. And, in reality, like that doesn't really happen, but that's something that kind of comes in to perspective with all of the I don't know.
I think the world would be vastly different if every time women had to deal with a skeezy dude, if women could summon a giant moth goddess to deal with the problem.
It reminds me of the vengeance demons in Buffy, where Anya, before Anya was Anya, she was a vengeance demon. It's like a woman gets wronged and she summons a vengeance demon.
Well, that also brings up a lot of things because what's interesting is the first part of the movie, which is kind of an adventure movie. Like when they first come back to Japan, they actually all decide collectively to not say anything, so to leave Infant Island alone. But since Nelson knows, and that's his part and parcel is artifact trafficking and human trafficking, he goes back and grabs them. But even more interesting in context is Japan has this system of idols, singers. And the Peanuts were kind of in that realm, but it's very exploitative. If once you age out, like it's really hard. You're expected to not have relationships. You're expected to, it's very male gazy. They're put together often by, men producers or executive producers. And so the way that, and nobody who's watching the Peanuts, there's very few people until it really becomes apparent who are actually protesting. They're just so enamored by this new pop group, exotic pop group, that everybody's okay with Nelson just totally exploiting them. And if you read,
I don't know, they don't seem okay with it. They seem afraid of him because a lot of
the audience is absolutely fine with it, and they're selling out show after show after show after
show. I see what you're saying. Yeah. I thought you meant the other characters.
No. And eventually that kind of turns, but in general, they're selling out every night and don't have a problem with it.
The audience, I don't think, knows that they're not there willingly. It's just like, in real life, all the time, we go and watch Chinese, circus, Chinese performances. And when you find out, like, how people are treated, like how the children are basically stuck in these, these groups from the very young age and just kind of forced to, you kind of go, oh, I kind of feel bad for enjoying that performance now because that's really crappy. So that part, I don't think it necessarily means that the audience knows that they are being exploited to the extent that they are. But the other characters just seem to kind of go along with it because they're afraid of him more than anything else.
Right. Yeah. But you can read about, the thing is, like, everybody kind of knows about how the idol, and it's not just Japan, but Japan's idol system, it's carried over a little bit into K-pop, and it's not I'm not saying trying to paint too broad of a brush. That's not, but there's a lot going on there that also this kind of mirrors, and it's really having this many years removed from when this was made is really interesting, and how the Peanuts, how the fairies are exploited and treated, and as long as they make every show, that's okay with the general audience because they don't want to think about that, right? And we often as try to put that out of our minds as well until
all the time
something happened.
But the fact is, man, we every single day we are using products and wearing clothing and enjoying entertainment that somebody was exploited to make for us. You know what I mean? Right. Like all the time. And so the people who do spend all their time making sure that everything they buy is free trade and that all the people, those folks are kind of seen as freaks in our society. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my gosh, these hippies, they blah, 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 and it's not the default of like all of us going, we should really research how people are treated who make our products and who make our food. That's just not how it is. So that I buy completely that's how that would go.
Again, vastly different if they could all summon different monsters to defend themselves. We would a vastly different landscape of respect and terror, I guess.
Yeah. Watch out for your wool sweaters.
I want to shoot back to the Zen character because I do think that there is something
special.
Well, outside of the actor's performance, which is great, and he is everything that Tony was saying. He's funny, but he's also kind of an action hero, and he's saving babies and beating up five guys, and
he's wily. He's like super clever.
Yeah, but also I think given what it feels very timely to have a hero that is a reporter, and I think that's something that's probably aged the best out of this movie.
Really good
given the climate of the last 4 or 5 years. I think seeing this sort of crusading reporter, because he's afraid of Nelson, but he's still trying throughout the whole thing to be like, okay, I'm gonna get these girls out of their situation. I'm gonna get them out of their situation, and he keeps trying. And they call, exactly. He's the snapping turtle. And did anybody else feel that way about him?
Well, I think I didn't quite think of it that way, but that's a really great point that you're making. That he is basically the hero of the story because he's like, I'm gonna get in. I'm gonna find my way onto the ship like a spy, like you're talking about the James Bond thing. I'm gonna find my way onto the ship like a spy. I'm gonna, like you think that he's kind of, dorky and funny and then suddenly he's like you said, taking out 5 guys all by himself. I mean, he's really surprising. So I think you're right. I think he's totally the hero of the story in a lot of ways. I hadn't thought of it that way at all.
I think we talked about it some too when we talked about like Kolchak. There's been this gradual, I think it still happens. We still get some reporter heroes in media, but something along the way changed from crusading reporter as hero to, by the time we get to X-Files, it's law enforcement.
Yeah,
but I think
right?
we're back. I think Drew's point about that we're back to the reporters is right, because if you look at the number of stories that have been broken by the New York Times, the Washington Post, Jacob Soboroff from NBC is doing amazing work about the border. It's like all these different journalists who are the ones who are bringing all these things out, like getting tax returns that nobody else can get, or getting all those things. It's just they really are still
Right,
the heroes.
but we're not seeing that. The difference, I think, is that we're not seeing that as much in the media,
Although I think we
like in movies or
I think
TV shows.
I think we're starting to.
Right. No, the pendulum is maybe starting to swing, but I agree. I think during this time period from the 60s to 70s, I think we saw a lot more. And like I said, we talked about this kind of when we talked about Kolchak and a few other movies like that. This idea of hard-hitting reporter, that tended to be more prevalent. I mean, you still had, tons of, it's like Kojak and Columbo and law enforcement was still part of that. But I think you switched, again, by the time we get to X-Files, neither of them is a reporter. They're often...
You're right.
The press is kind of in the back, and so I think there were more characters like Zen during this time period.
I would agree,
and I think it's fascinating
to
see that, to just look at it objectively, like.
Because even the ones I can think of are like from the 50s, like Lois Lane or whatever. You're just
that's actually kind of what I was thinking of, because like we now have a Superman TV show on the CW that is just as much about Lois Lane than it is about Superman.
But my point is that Lois Lane has always been that character ever since she was conceived, and so the fact that they're making shows about and they continue to feature her is notable, but she's not new. And we haven't really seen a lot of new journalist superhero characters. That we've got some stories like The Post with Tom Hanks that feature some journalists who were brave, but not a lot of fictional. Like there's way more fiction that has law enforcement heroes and maybe first responders, and very few, I can't think of any honestly, that are new journalists.
And I could be wrong in what the media I tend to watch, but I think it's.
Well, I was also thinking of The Post, but
sure.
But you're like I said, I think this is something. I think this is like the start of something like that. I think that I might harken back more, like as we'll see, because who knows what the future will bring. But
for a while now, though, it has seemed like when you do see reporters in shows and movies, they're usually side characters and they're obnoxious.
They're annoying as hell, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they're the ones who are in the faces of the people. They're the ones bothering the person's child at school. Yeah, exactly.
So I feel like it's almost like ingrained that you're suddenly like, it's propaganda to be like, remove their humanity, like that person's a jerk. Like I don't like. It's okay if they're, not, if they get theirs, like they're not, worthy or whatnot. But it just, there's so many like different examples of that, as I don't know, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's an interesting point. Like maybe if they had made this now, the Zen character wouldn't be quite so heroic. He probably would have been more cowardly and
more comical.
I
also like that he's kind of a full-figured guy.
Right. That's what I'm saying. He is comical, but he's also strong and smart. And I think he would just be comical.
Yeah, they'd probably put like a Jack Black-esque character type.
Well, when you say Jack Black actually is, his characters actually are pretty fully realized whenever. Yeah. So yeah.
Actually, Jack Black would be a really good Zen analog in an American version of this.
Yeah,
I would actually buy. I think Jack Black would work really well. I mean, he was Viet Cong, so
I think that to Jamie's point, though, the fact that he isn't like, because you have Doctor, who is a more classically handsome guy,
right?
Whereas like the Zen character is a bit more, he's
funny looking. He's comical.
He looks like what we think of a comedian. He's more of an everyman looking guy. And I think like when he starts to like, again, take on 5 guys and win, like that's that's kind of cool. Like I think that
and it seems like it surprises him just as much as it surprises those guys. And that's what I think is like, even though he's like, yeah, but he's like, oh, like it's, I don't
It
know.
worked.
There's, yeah, exactly. But
yeah,
he's
it's sort of
very
that
fluid with his moves. It's like, oh, have you had some training there, Zen? Like, you know,
he is the snapping turtle.
That's true.
So something else I think is fascinating about this movie is its use of religion. And like, first of all, Mothra, unlike Rodan, which is a awakened prehistoric animal, and Godzilla, who is a mutated prehistoric animal, and then you have King Kong, who is a time displaced prehistoric animal, and you have all these things. You know, you look at like the other monsters in the giant monster universe leading up to this, you know, the ants and them, you know, the you know, grasshoppers in the beginning of the end. You know, it's you either have reawakened prehistoric animals or mutants. Mothra, even though there is a radiation element, is a god, and you have these goddess, and she has people who worship her, and there's even like a symbol for her on this island which looks like a cross. And I think that is a very interesting choice, considering this is a Japanese movie, and you know, while there is Christianity in Japan, it's not, you know, the widespread religion like it is here in the States. And I just the way the even the way that the movie is ended is, you know, with the use of like church bells and painting this big, you know, Mothra rune onto a, you know, it's not, you know, they don't use an oxygen destroyer on Mothra. They paint a big glyph onto the ground and summon her with church bells. And, you know, even the Mothra song is, you know, it's a great catchy song, but it's a prayer. And I think that's what sets this apart a lot from other monster movies from this era.
Is there a translation of what the song says other than Mothra? Like, is it made up, or is it Japanese? Like, what language is that?
I want to say it is, but there was some. I have to look it up again because, and I feel silly for not having pre-gamed that part because I meant to do that.
I should have as well.
I want to say that it's translated. I've seen the translation. You know, some of the other parts they kind of go with you know, it's a little looser. But
the original lyrics, I just looked it up. The original lyrics are in Japanese.
Yeah.
There's an English translation. I'll post this on the Facebook group tomorrow. There's also an Indonesian translation, and
that's what I was thinking of. Was there was kind of a mix that, but I should have pre-gamed that more. And that's
don't you love that we have the internet that where we can just?
No, I got you. I just, you know, it's one of those things though where, you know, you're trying to be the most professional, and this week has been tough, and you've had a lot on your plate. Don't even worry about it.
But what does everybody make of all this religious imagery? Like, you know, how does this hit you when you're watching a monster movie, and it is very much still a monster movie, but you're hit with all these like religious ideas, and does this affect you at all?
I think we have that in a lot of the horror that we watch, where the monster has as much especially when it's like something where there's like a satanic kind of vibe to it. You know, there's as much not metaphor, what's the word I'm looking for? Symbology. Yeah, well, there's as much symbology and as much, you know, like you said about prayer and chanting and all that. I think that's pretty common. But I like what you're saying about the song being a prayer, and the fact that the church bells are what brings her in. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
That it does feel like she's more revered than worshipped. Like it's not like the satanic things that we see where it's like, you know, it's more like reverence. It's more like she is a goddess as opposed to just somebody to be afraid of or to try to appease.
Well, also it's interesting that this adventurer group is when they put together everybody, they make it a point to interview and then bring on board a linguist just so they can make sure that they've got all their bases covered when they go to Infant Island, because they want to make sure that they can hopefully talk to the natives that they didn't even know were there. And then that comes in when they try to decipher the runes. I think that's really awesome. Eventually, though, we do get King Caesar and Megalon that were both summoned and are deities in their own right, or at least summon monsters. But this is kind of the first setting that tone.
That while Kong is worshipped as a god, he is not a god. But even this sort of religious reverence was sort of transferred onto Godzilla himself in the legendary movies. But
that's why I made the point of the appeasing, because with Godzilla, you get the impression they're like, oh, we don't want to piss him off. Let's make an offering.
He is an angry god.
Yeah. And this is more like she's held up as a figure of I don't know. Like I said, revered is the only word I can think of.
Well, you were asking about the song, and it's like the lyrics actually, like one of the main chanting is like our guardian angel, and so there's again kind of going back to like the Christian symbolism there, with the angels and the church bells and all of that fun stuff. Like their song is, I don't know. It's also, Drew was saying how it has that prayer feel to it. Like even like the chord, like I just loved listening to them. Like I was like, I need to go check this band out now.
Me too.
I just
so beautifully.
Like, yeah, their voices blend so beautifully, and that was one of the things that I feel like made this movie really stand out. Like the whole this whole time we've been talking about it, and I'm just like Mothra! Like Drew and I have been doing that like all night to each
Katerina and I were singing it, harmonizing it last night.
Yeah, it's such a good little tune, and all of them are very beautiful. And whenever there's music, there's a feeling of religiosity to people, because there's the whole thing about like manipulating emotions, and what does the church do better than that? We're getting these,
but also giving, like, the idea, if you're a religious person, I'm not particularly religious at all, but I am a spiritual person, and I grew up religious. It gives you hope, and that's these little fairies. That's their hope and their faith is in Mothra. Like the idea that they're like, we're not going to despair, because we have the hope and the faith that Mothra will come for us.
And I read that Mothra is actually like a reincarnation of herself.
Mothra is kind of the phoenix, especially when you look at the way she is portrayed throughout the rest of this franchise, as recent as the Godzilla King of the Monsters from a couple of years ago. Mothra, when she dies, she's reborn through like the next group of caterpillars, and then there's so Mothra always is in this state of death and rebirth. And I don't know if that was an intentional riff on the myth of the phoenix, but it's hard for me not to think that it was.
Yeah, especially during that one scene when they use their lasers.
Oh God, the electro guns.
Yeah.
Even it's also fascinating. The score the parts weren't composed by Kube, because he didn't think he could do the Peanut stuff justice, or felt daunted by having to write that. Which I think is interesting, because he's such a great composer and has such a hand in what we think of as how Godzilla sounds. I think he probably could have done it, but the fact that he was like, I don't know, is really interesting. But what we got was just really good. I have a collection of soundtracks that are like kind of the best of the different eras, and this one's always great. And I think that was one of the stronger reinterpretations in the previous Godzilla as well. Like that part of the score was one of my favorites.
Absolutely.
And it's done so well. They just did such a great job with that. But also, but to remind you, like, Mothra starts this, but again, King Caesar was based on an Okinawan mythological creature, and Megalon is totally not even that, but it's still a deity to the Cetopians. But it took Mothra kind of setting the stage. So there is kind of a mix between, and that's kind of where we get, there's either the deity, summoned deity kind of version, or there's the prehistoric beast that's either mutated or irradiated. And those are the two kinds of kaiju we get throughout this era.
And I think, what's interesting looking at the influence of King Kong on this movie is, whereas Kong was, I've already kind of said this, but, to reiterate it a little more strongly, Kong is worshipped as a god, but he's not. He's just a prehistoric animal that's outside of time. Mothra really is, what the natives of Infant Island think she is. She is there. There's something supernatural about her. She's not just like an atomic freak. And I think that's also like sending these movies in a direction of a more fantastical universe. Not that, Godzilla, the idea of like an atomic bomb awakening and mutating a dinosaur isn't fantastical, but dinosaurs were a thing and atomic bombs are a thing. Those are two things that are quote unquote real world. Mothra is completely a creation of fantasy, and there's something kind of fascinating about that. And the influence that this had on this as a genre is, it can't be understated. So speaking of King Kong, and I think this might be the last topic I hit on, but the influence of King Kong, because we are about to look at Kong versus King Kong versus Godzilla. The influence of King Kong on this is very strongly felt. You start off on an island. Something is taken from an island and exploited, then there's a final act where a giant creature wreaks havoc. Tony, I mean, when you watch this, is Kong, is it in the back of your mind, or do you watch this and you just take in Mothra as Mothra?
No, I think to me it feels that way. Just the exploitation part as well. Like how natives are portrayed and are the central focus of around the monster as well. It feels that way. I don't think if you've seen Kong movies, and if you're listening to this, I'm sure you probably have. I won't make too many assumptions, but in general, it's hard to not see those kind of parallels. In fact, kind of how the structure of it, and when the beast is released, and that kind of third act destruction after destruction feel of it even kind of is mirrored here. They're different in the way that the monsters are handled, but in Kong there's the lull, when he's chained and people are coming to see him, and here it's Mothra, has wreaked some destruction, is now changing in, from larva form to moth form. And so even the beats feel kind of similar. But it is interesting to see a Kong type story that's also just a totally different flavor. That part is really what makes it kind of cool and more interesting.
Awesome. Anybody else have anything to add to that thought?
Nope.
Jamie?
Tony covered it.
No, that's...
All right. Well, then I'm going to go back around and get our final thoughts on
I said
Mothra.
my King Kong stuff, and I think to me the biggest guffaw that I was just like, man, the natives, that was
yeah.
I mean, I know it was the 60s, but it was a different time, but it's just
I mean, still, when I went to Japan, I guess it's been a decade ago or so. I went into a couple stores and I saw some dolls and statues that I definitely were like, oh.
Yeah, there's actually
you still sell this?
It's been a big discussion lately about, racism, obviously regarding the Asian American community, and I my heart goes out to everyone affected by that. But
absolutely,
there's a lot of talk about how there is an exceptional amount of racism within the Asian American community as well. And so this has actually been an opportunity for them to not only deal with, being the victims, but also as victimizers, and kind
Right.
of pull into the intersectionality of where they are and what they have done at the same point. And I think, there's a student, not student, a school board member. I can't remember what state she's in, but she was recently fired because she called out how there was, and I'm paraphrasing, but she called out the similarities in the racism factor of the Black community, and the similarities have how the Asian Americans and Asian community is currently being treated. And, obviously this is a Japanese movie, but, we all know not a lot of all Americans are as discerning with their, xenist and racist ways. So anyone who's just Asian, it doesn't matter if they're from China, is being affected by this. And, I just, as a group, I'm sure we could all say that, we denounce the violence and the hatred that has been directed towards the Asian American community and
Yeah, and I guarantee you that people who are Japanese and people who are other ethnicities are getting the same prejudice, same racism hurled at them that the Chinese people are, because of not just the coronavirus, but just in general. So I think the fact, you distinguish the fact this is a Japanese movie, but I think the fact is that it doesn't really matter about, which ethnicity they are. They all get the same hatred, unfortunately, and it's just so depressing. And the fact is, like, as a Latina and an immigration lawyer, I see a lot of it for the Hispanic community as well. If it's a different reasons and different nature in some cases, but for sure, both within. And you mentioned the thing about like how Asians will be racist within themselves, their own culture. That's how Latinos are, for sure. Like, we really have a very strong racism within our own culture.
I think honestly, that's every culture. I feel like there's always some level of self-hatred that we all.
Well, but I don't even mean just self-hatred. I mean the whiter people being racist against darker people. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like they don't hate themselves; they hate the people.
No. I meant
there's the white superiority. Yeah,
I agree.
Well, on that light note, let's get final thoughts. We're gonna go Jamie, Julia, Tony, then me. Jamie, final thoughts. Mothra.
I said, out of all of the Godzilla monster movies, and this one technically makes no mention of Godzilla, because it's really the first monster that gets absorbed into the Godzilla universe. That was a separate movie beforehand, and I feel like I learned quite a bit about Mothra, and I understand why there are some ideas of feminism behind this movie, and I do appreciate that. I kind of wish there were some strides that had been a little bit bigger, but it's still was entertaining. I have to say it's probably my favorite of all of the old Godzilla movies. Or again, I keep saying it's a Godzilla movie, but I mean, is it really? It's not.
Godzilla universe.
Yeah. It's Godzilla universe. Okay. But I like it. I like the music a lot, I think, and I can't wait to go look up some of the Peanuts old albums.
Yeah, for sure. I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning, because I don't really think we talked about it much in our conversation. We covered a lot of things, but we didn't really talk about the effects and how expensive this film was. This is way more expensive than the other films of its time in Japan. And just all the wonderful miniature work, all the wonderful effect work that they just did so much to make it look fantastic. The costumes, all the gilded stuff that the fairies are in, like the beautiful carriage, the floating carriage, like the place that they have at the end where I guess it's like a palace or something. All those things are it's a gorgeous looking movie. And so I really wanted to just make sure and hit on that a little bit. But yeah, it's very enjoyable and obviously problematic in its ways, as are many of the films that we talk about. But yeah, I enjoyed talking about it, and thank you so much, Jamie, for joining us.
Yeah. Oh, for me, I'm with Julie. It's a beautiful film. It looks amazing. The effects are great. Even the effects that we now go, oh, that's not as great, or you may get a chuckle or whatever. For its time, it has a lot of groundbreaking stuff. It set the tone for Mothra for future, tons of future movies. And I think it's groundbreaking in that way. It is interesting because it is a slower movie in general. A lot of people talk about monster movies. I think we talked about it before. We usually remember just all the monster fights. So the destruction in this is really late in the game, and it's a lot more about the buildup to the interactions with the fairies, and then all of the kind of political intrigue and exploitation stuff, and the reporters kind of figuring everything out, and I think it's really, all that stuff is really cool and interesting as well. It's not just this monster movie. There's a lot of meat to all the different parts. I really enjoy it. And the Mill Creek Blu-ray of it looks amazing as well. That's the latest one that's come out. I think I got the Steelbook, of course, when it came out because I had to. But I do think that a lot of people, even myself, I remember more from Mothra Godzilla, the Mothra Godzilla movie. So it was really cool going back to this one and seeing the origin and how much that flavor is pulled through the rest of the kaiju movies that come afterwards.
Awesome. I agree that the effects are amazing in this. I think I said this in my intro that I think this is some of the most convincing effects that Toho ever pulled out of their toolbox. I think that it is also, I will echo Julia's statement. I think this is a beautiful, colorful movie, and color with a capital C. Like this is uses color in the way that only older movie, we kind of take color movies for granted, but this is when color was still relatively new. And it really shows it. Again, among the finest movies that one of the finest movies that Toho ever produced as far as their sci-fi horror output. I just love it to death. And yeah, Tony is right. The Blu-ray is wonderful. So going back around, starting with Jamie and ending with me, let's get this week's endorsement. Jamie?
Well, as far as entertainment goes, I have been kind of engrossed in reading Waking the Witch. It's reflections on women, magic, and power. Speaking of, feministy themes. But it's by Pam Grossman, host of the Witch Wave podcast. And it kind of goes back and forth in regards to the idea of feminism and intersectionality through the ideas of and themes of witches and witchcraft throughout the centuries, and how we still kind of hold women to a certain ideal, and how that ideal kind of changes throughout our relationship with identity. So it's very interesting. And other than that, I have been all about fresh off the boat, as Drew knows, and I kind of binge watch sitcoms sometimes when I have to do a lot of graphic design work, and they're for the show that I'm working on for Girls Rock. And so I have been, since the Lunar New Year, I have been watching a lot of Fresh Off the Boat, and it's a great show. It's perfect for this time when people should be trying to find ways to engage in other cultures than their own, and especially Asian Americans. We should be doing anything we can to be kind of learning more about these people who really need to, have a chance at being, honored and respected like they deserve. And I love Fresh Off the Boat. It's just constant. It's very funny and witty, and for those of us who are 90s kids, we will greatly appreciate a lot of the fashion choices and whatnot. But it's it's really good. It's good quality TV. So that's my endorsements.
Cool.
Oh yeah, I've got one more actually. And watch the Girls Rock, the YouTube channel for the GRA Rockorama,
Awesome.
airing on April 23rd. So it's a panel discussion on unity and featuring a special performance by Los Alcos. But you can also watch all of the previous episodes of the GRA Rockorama and see some really great discussions with some Austin celebrities and live music performances, and on some really awesome topics that we recommend parents watching with their mature tweens and teens to facilitate some deeper discussions on topics that may or may not be already in your wheelbarrow.
Like what?
Sex and self-care was our first theme for our first show. We had Gina Chavez and Tamika Jones. Also, we had as our musical guests, along with Trouble in the Streets. And then we had as our guest expert panelists, we had Dr. Osai, or Dr. UC Osai, excuse me. And she is she's a ton of great things, but she is a assistant professor at UT. She's also the director of women's health services at UT Health Austin in the Women's Health Clinic. But she is also the creator of Woke is the New Sexy, an adult sex ed program, and
Cool.
is available online. We also had Linz Amer from Queer Kid Stuff, who has been on, a TED Talk and has, had like 8 million views. But they're, discussions on everything anything gay, but like how to talk to someone about any sort of topic relating to sexuality. And that goes for anyone of any age. So we have like subjects like that. For our Lunar New Year's special, we had our otherness and inclusion, talking about the Asian American experience and, the idea of living between Western heritage or Western culture that they're so inundated here with, but also the Eastern heritage that they've grown up with in their household, maybe speaking a different language, eating different food, and, how to find their place in between. So it's all different types of topics, and we have a lot of great people on our show. So it's definitely worth a watch. And
Very cool.
the music alone is great. So
Awesome.
now I'm really done endorsing stuff.
Awesome. Julia, any endorsements this week?
I can't remember, since it's been a while since we were together. Can't remember if I revisited Mr. Mercedes last time we talked, because I know I endorsed it the first season. But we watched the second, or I guess it's the second, or is it third season? Whatever the new season is that dropped, of Mr. Mercedes. And I just have to say again that show is so creative. It's so original. Like I pride myself in being kind of a plot psychic. Like I'll watch things. I'll be like, I can tell you how the rest of this is going to go. Like this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. This is how it's going to end. And usually I'm, if I give you 3 things, one of them will for sure be it. But that show surprises me every time. Every episode, I'm always like, oh, I did not see that coming. Oh my God, I can't believe that happened. So that is a really good show. If anybody's interested in something, just if it's violent and it's terrifying, but it's very original. I feel like there's been other things. I know we've been watching Falcon and Winter Soldier. It's been really fun. But I can't think if there's anything else that I was just really excited about. So if I think of it, I will let you know. But for now, I think that's it.
Okie doke. And Tony, anything to endorse?
I think I'd posted a bunch of just off the wall stuff in our chat that we have going between all of us. Lots of sword and sandal movies, lots of just random pirate movies. Really odd choice. I haven't finished it yet. Like if you want to see just a weirdo Jackie Chan movie, I started watching Bleeding Steel, and I'm not sure it's great, but it is fascinating in many of its choices. I've also been really enjoying Falcon and Winter Soldier. The deep cuts that they're doing, as well as the relevance of how they approach the characters is really interesting. I wasn't expecting that, and I really have enjoyed that. I'm trying to think of what else. That's kind of, I don't know, it's been kind of a crazy time lately here at my house. So I'm kind of drawing a blank. I will say, this is a little self-serving, but also just because I think it's worth giving credit where credit is due. We just wrapped, since I work at Rooster Teeth, we just wrapped the season finale for Ruby season 8. And we collectively, as an animation studio, made a whole season pretty much within the confines of pandemic. I was part of the team that helped transition the studio. It's way more than just me, but I was on the team that helped transition a whole studio to working from home. We had our IT department, the rest of the programmers that I work with. My job is kind of problem solving a lot, render farm kind of maintenance, and then being the go-between, basically between the people who are, all the art teams and everybody who's making the stuff, and then the programming team who makes all the tools. And it's a pretty phenomenal season, made even more phenomenal. I have to give a shout out to everybody who actually, we did it, right? Like we actually made a whole thing with everybody working from home. And, we have a few people who are in facilities who go in, we have all kinds of safety protocols for that and everything. But that wrapped, Ruby season 8 wrapped Saturday. And I couldn't be prouder of everybody who actually worked super hard and made that happen.
Congratulations.
Yeah, there were, through an ice storm, through all the stuff we encountered, we only technically took a week off. It was a little bit more than that, but because we had planned well, there was only a week delay in actually getting episodes out, which is insane now that I think about it, knowing where we were when I first joined, which my first Ruby was season 3. So 5 seasons later, we did all of this, and that's through the hard work of a lot of people from management of the studio who've really taken the reins on down. So I would be remiss to not give a shout out to all the teams of people who really, everybody had their own stuff they're going through this year, and that happens. And we're actually in production for 9. There's no real gap that in actual production of a thing, and that's pretty phenomenal. So shout out to everybody. And I tend to think of it, the way I work and the way my team works is, I see because I have to interact with everybody, I see the whole studio, right? So I tend to think of the team as the actual animation studio, and seeing that and just seeing everybody working together to do this has been pretty impressive. So
there's been such a disconnect with or a disruption, I should say, with the art community and, music, and it's great to hear anybody getting anything done and doing something for
I'll admit I'm with you. My music, I'm envious isn't the right word, but I see a lot of people who are still making music and really doing things, and I am a little bit envious, but mostly just proud of you're way better than me. My music production has not been what I had hoped. And part of my band, especially Deserts of Mars, has dealt with a lot of hardship, which hasn't helped that. The 2 other guys in my band have been through way more than me. So, keeping it together and continuing to make things, is something else. And my tip of the hat to anybody who's still doing that, who's able to make an album, make art, push through. Your fortitude and creativity is to be admired, I think. So, and that's again why I felt like I just should say, if you're able to check it out, this is our 8th season. That alone is something else. We had our 100th episode happen this year as well, which was amazing. So yeah, like I said, I would feel remiss to not give a shout out to all the people I work with who have braved everything and still made a whole season pretty much. That's finished a whole thing and are still making stuff. And that's in addition to we had the new season of Red versus Blue, a ton of 2D animation. Like all the people are just, it's been impressive to watch. You know, even though some days on my job, when computers are fighting me every step of the way, I go, wow. But even through that, we still made the thing. So yeah, that's been crazy.
Drew.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Tony. So first off, I kind of adjacent to what we have been talking about and what we will be talking about, because when you think about giant monster movies, and in particular Godzilla movies, you have to think about dinosaurs. And I've been reading a book that I recently finished that is about dinosaurs being dropped into the Vietnam War, and it's called Primitive War. It's an indie book. You can get it on Amazon. It's by a guy named Ethan Pettis. And it's not going to be for everybody. Like, it is very, very violent. This isn't like a PG-13 Jurassic World kind of ride. Like you have soldiers being eviscerated by various dinosaurs. And in fact, I previously on my Instagram described this as Predator meets Jurassic Park. But honestly, tonally, it is definitely leaning further into the Predator side of things than the Jurassic Park side of things. But it's a lot of fun, especially if you like Lost World fiction and dinosaurs and indie horror. I think you're a fan of any one of those things, you'll get something out of it. And of course, you're also supporting, someone who has put out their own book. So I think there's something to be said for that. Speaking of, the Best of Austin Awards are happening right now because they skipped 2020. They're happening earlier in 2021. And I am once again nominated for Best Comic Creator. Thank you. If you are a Texan and you would like to show support, please go vote for me. You can very easily by going to the Austin Chronicle website. They got a big old banner right now for Best of Austin on there, and I would appreciate it. I am very, very happy. I'm once again nominated alongside some very talented people, including some people that I'm friendly with. So like it's which is always cool. But I still want to win, so I I would like your vote. And that's going to be my only other endorsement, because like when it's been so long since we've been together, actually trying to think of an endorsement, I was almost overwhelmed by thinking of all the stuff that I've been watching and reading and everything. So I'm just going to leave it at those two things. You should also watch The Girls Rock-A-Rama, because Jamie works really, really hard on that, and I actually see her working on it every day.
Agreed.
And sometimes day and night.
Thank you.
It's every episode has been a labor of love. And I think you should all jump on YouTube and watch the episodes that have been, and you should watch the upcoming episode. And this has been such a fun discussion. I've loved being the host.
You did a great job.
Thank you. Although I will happily pass the baton back to Jason when he is done being a literary genius, and we come back to discuss Godzilla.
He's never done.
Kong.
He's never done being a literary genius.
Well, I know. When you're a writer, it consumes you.
Yes.
I'm excited.
Although I think when you say it, you have to say it like Wile E. Coyote. Genius. He's a literary genius.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. And again, we will see you soon to talk about Godzilla versus Kong.
Great having you, Jamie.
Thanks. Yeah. I've had a great time. It's been great chatting with y'all.
Good night, guys.
Good night, everybody.